My name is Eleanor Matthews. I'm 73 years old, and I learned something important that Sunday evening. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the very ones you need protection from. The dining room was full. 12 relatives crowded around the table my late husband built 40 years ago with his own hands. The air smelled of roasted chicken and rosemary potatoes, but underneath it all, I could sense something else. Tension. Expectation. The kind of atmosphere that precedes a storm. I should have known something was wrong when my daughter-in-law Jessica insisted on hosting this family gathering at my house. She'd been distant for months, ever since her husband, my son Robert, got that promotion at the tech firm. Money changes people. I'd seen it happen before, but I never thought I'd see it happen to my own blood. "More wine, Mother Matthews?" Jessica asked, her smile tight and artificial as a department store mannequin. She'd stopped calling me Eleanor 6 months ago, right around the time Robert started talking about better investment opportunities and maximizing assets. "No, thank you, dear." I kept my voice pleasant, though my hands trembled slightly as I passed the bowl of green beans to my younger sister Margaret, who sat to my right. Margaret caught my eye with a questioning look. She knew me well enough to sense my unease. The conversation flowed around me, Robert discussing stock portfolios with his cousin David, Jessica's mother Patricia complaining about the cost of her recent cruise, my nephew Thomas showing off photos of his new boat. Everyone seemed prosperous, confident, absorbed in their own worlds of acquisition and display. Then my grandson Brandon stood up. He was 24 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with his father's dark eyes and his mother's calculating expression. He'd moved back home 8 months ago after losing his third job in 2 years, something about creative differences with management, though I suspected laziness played a larger role. He'd been living in my basement guest suite, rent-free, while I continued to occupy the master bedroom on the second floor, the room I'd shared with my husband for 37 years before he passed. "I have an announcement," Brandon said loudly, cutting through the various conversations. The room fell silent. Jessica and Robert exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Knowing? Encouraging? My stomach tightened. "Grandma," Brandon said, turning to face me directly. His tone was casual, almost bored, as if he were discussing the weather. "We've been talking, and we've decided you need to move to a nursing home." The words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. Around the table, forks paused midway to mouths. My sister Margaret inhaled sharply beside me. "Excuse me?" I said quietly. "A nursing home," Brandon repeated, louder now, more confident. "You're getting old, Grandma. You need professional care, and frankly, we need your room. This house is too big for just you, and I need proper space. The basement is cramped and dark. I deserve the master suite." Deserve. The word echoed in my mind. "Brandon, this is my home," I said, keeping my voice level, despite the rage beginning to build beneath my sternum, a cold, hard knot of fury. "I've lived here for 42 years. Your grandfather and I bought this house when your father was just a baby." "Yeah, well, Grandpa's dead now," Brandon said with a shrug that made my blood freeze. "And you're not getting any younger. Face it, you're basically useless. You can't even drive anymore." That wasn't true. I'd voluntarily stopped driving at night because of the glare from oncoming headlights, but I drove perfectly well during the day. The lie was so casual, so careless, that it took my breath away. "Brandon, perhaps we should discuss this privately," my son Robert began, but his voice lacked conviction. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Why?" Brandon demanded. "Everyone here knows she's becoming a burden. She wanders around this huge house by herself. It's wasteful. I could use that space. I'm trying to start a business and I need an office, a proper bedroom, room to grow." Room to grow. This boy, this man who'd never held a job for more than 6 months, who played video games until 3 in the morning, who left dirty dishes in the sink for days, who'd never paid a single utility bill in his entire life, was lecturing me about growth. "The answer is no," I said firmly. "This is my home, Brandon. I'm not going anywhere." That's when everything changed. Brandon's face darkened. He moved around the table toward me, his footsteps heavy against the hardwood floor I'd refinished just 2 years ago. "You don't get it, old woman. This isn't a request." "Brandon, calm down," my nephew Thomas said uneasily. But he didn't stand up. No one stood up. Brandon reached me and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into the soft flesh above my elbow. "You're going to move out," he said, his face inches from mine. I could smell beer on his breath. He'd been drinking before dinner. "You're going to sign the house over to Dad, and you're going to go quietly to whatever facility we choose." "Let go of me," I said, my voice ice cold now. "Make me," he sneered. And then he shoved me, hard. I stumbled backward, my hip slamming into the edge of the sideboard. Pain shot through my side, sharp and bright. I caught myself against the wall, my breath coming in short gasps. For a moment, the room spun. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked around the table at 12 faces. My son Robert stared at his plate. Jessica examined her manicured nails. Robert's cousin David suddenly became fascinated by his phone. My sister Margaret started to rise, but her husband Frank pulled her back down with a warning hand on her arm. Patricia, Jessica's mother, actually smiled, a small, satisfied curve of her lips. No one said a word. No one defended me. In that moment, something inside me crystallized. The hurt transformed into something harder, colder, more purposeful. These people, my family, had just shown me exactly who they were, and I believed them. "I see," I said softly. I straightened carefully, ignoring the throbbing in my hip. "I understand completely." "Good," Brandon said, crossing his arms. "So you'll start packing?" "No," I replied. "I'll be leaving now, but not in the way you think." I walked slowly to the front hall, retrieved my purse and coat, and pulled out my cell phone. My hands were steady now, perfectly steady. Behind me I could hear confused murmuring from the dining room. "Who are you calling?" Jessica demanded, appearing in the hallway. "Mother Matthews, let's be reasonable about this. Brandon got a little excited, but he has a point. You're not equipped to maintain this property anymore. We're thinking of your welfare." I ignored her and dialed a number I hadn't called in 6 months. It rang twice. "Victor Ashford," a deep voice answered. "Victor, this is Eleanor Matthews." A pause. "Mrs. Matthews, it's been a while. How can I help you?" "I need you to come to my house, now, and bring the documentation we discussed last spring." Another pause, longer this time. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely certain. I'll be there in an hour." I ended the call and turned to face Jessica, who'd been joined by Robert and Brandon in the hallway. Behind them, the other relatives were starting to gather, drawn by curiosity. "Who was that?" Robert demanded. "Mother, what are you doing?" "Making a phone call," I said simply. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be waiting outside. I find I need some fresh air." "You can't just leave in the middle of dinner," Jessica protested. "That's incredibly rude." The audacity of that statement, after her son had physically assaulted me in my own home, left me momentarily speechless. Then I smiled. Not a warm smile, not a kind one. "Watch me," I said. I walked out my front door and sat on the porch swing, the same swing where I'd rocked my infant son to sleep on summer nights decades ago. The evening was cool and crisp, with the first hints of autumn coloring the maple trees that lined my street. From inside, I could hear raised voices. Confusion, anger, speculation. Let them wonder. I hadn't told anyone except Victor about my plans last spring. It had seemed premature then, overly cautious, perhaps even paranoid. But I'd noticed things. Small things. The way Robert and Jessica exchanged looks when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The questions about my estate planning. The sudden interest in my financial situation, the suggestions that I was getting forgetful when I'd never been sharper. My husband Thomas, God rest his soul, had been a careful man, a strategic thinker. Before he died, he'd looked at me with those fading blue eyes and said, "Eleanor, promise me you'll protect yourself. Protect what we built. Money brings out the worst in people, even family, especially family." I'd promised. And I'd kept that promise. 6 months ago, I'd contacted Victor Ashford, the attorney who'd handled Thomas's estate. I'd asked him to prepare certain documents, make certain arrangements, create certain safeguards. Victor had been skeptical at first, suggesting I was being overly pessimistic about my family's intentions. Tonight had proven I wasn't pessimistic enough. The minutes ticked by. Through the window, I could see my family gathered in the living room now, their dinner abandoned. They kept looking out at me, pointing, arguing. Brandon gesticulated wildly. Robert paced. Jessica sat with her arms crossed, her expression tight with calculation. 45 minutes after my call, I saw headlights turn onto my street. A silver Mercedes pulled into my driveway, and Victor Ashford emerged, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and an immaculately tailored suit. He carried a leather briefcase. Behind him, a second car pulled up. This one was a black SUV, and two men in business suits stepped out. I recognized one of them, James Chen, a real estate attorney I'd consulted 3 months ago. The other was younger, carrying what appeared to be a laptop case. "Mrs. Matthews," Victor said, climbing the porch steps. "I've brought everything we discussed, plus James and his associate to witness and notarize as needed." "Thank you for coming so quickly. When you called, I knew it was serious." His eyes flickered to the window, where several faces were now pressed against the glass. "Should we go inside?" "Yes," I said, standing. "I think it's time." I opened the front door and walked in, followed by Victor and the two other men. The living room fell silent as we entered. 12 pairs of eyes stared at the newcomers with varying expressions of confusion, concern, and in some cases, fear. "Mother, who are these people?" Robert demanded. "This is Victor Ashford, my attorney," I said calmly, "and James Chen, a real estate attorney. I believe you've made your positions quite clear this evening, so I've decided it's time to make my position equally clear." "What are you talking about?" Jessica's voice had risen to a near shriek. "What is this?" Victor set his briefcase on the coffee table and opened it with practiced precision. "Mrs. Matthews contacted me 6 months ago with concerns about her family's intentions regarding her property and assets. Tonight's events have confirmed those concerns were well-founded." "This is ridiculous," Brandon said, but his bravado had faded. He looked nervous now, uncertain. "Is it?" Victor pulled out several folders. "Mrs. Matthews, would you like me to explain, or would you prefer to do it yourself?" "I'll explain," I said. I looked around at each face, people I'd loved, supported, sheltered, fed, people who'd just stood by while I was assaulted. "First, let me address the immediate situation. Brandon, you put your hands on me in anger and shoved me. That's assault. I have 12 witnesses, including your own parents." "I barely touched you," Brandon protested. "You're exaggerating, you crazy old—" "Careful," Victor interrupted sharply. "Every word you say right now can and will be documented." Brandon's mouth snapped shut. "Second," I continued, "you demanded I move out of my own home and into a nursing home against my will, claiming I'm incompetent or burdensome. Let me address that directly." I nodded to Victor, who pulled out a document. "This is a comprehensive medical and psychological evaluation completed by Mrs. Matthews 3 weeks ago," Victor said. "It confirms she is in excellent cognitive health, fully competent, and capable of independent living. There is no medical justification for any claim of diminished capacity." Robert's face had gone pale. "Mother, why would you get evaluated?" "Because I'm not stupid, Robert," I said quietly. "I heard you and Jessica talking 2 months ago when you thought I was asleep. About getting me declared incompetent, about taking power of attorney, about managing my assets." Jessica made a small sound, something between a gasp and a denial. "Third," I said, "let's discuss this house. Brandon seems to think he deserves my bedroom, my home. Let me clarify something. This house is not part of any estate that will someday transfer to you, Robert." "What?" Robert's voice cracked. "What are you talking about? Of course it is. You always said—" "I said many things," I interrupted. "But 6 months ago, I took action. Victor, please explain." Victor pulled out another document. 3 months ago, Mrs. Matthews established a trust. The house and all her significant assets have been transferred into that trust. She retains full life estate rights, meaning she can live here and control everything until her death. Upon her death, the trust assets will be distributed according to her wishes, which she can modify at any time. You can't, Jessica stammered. Who's the beneficiary? Currently, Victor said, the primary beneficiary is a foundation Mrs. Matthews has established to support elder abuse prevention and education. 100% of the estate will fund that foundation unless Mrs. Matthews chooses to modify the trust distribution. The silence that followed was profound. You're cutting us out? Robert finally said, his voice hollow. Your own son? You cut yourself out, I replied. The trust was established with you as primary beneficiary, Robert. That changed tonight, the moment your son put his hands on me and you said nothing, did nothing, just sat there like a coward. I didn't know he would. You knew exactly what he was doing, I said, and my voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. You and Jessica have been setting this up for months. The comments about my forgetfulness that aren't true, the suggestions I can't manage my own affairs, the sudden interest in my finances. The family gathering tonight wasn't about connection. It was about intimidation, about breaking me down in front of witnesses so I'd seem confused or difficult when you started legal proceedings. That's not true, Jessica cried. We care about you. We're worried about you. Really? I turned to face her directly. Tell me, Jessica, when was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you visited without asking about my will or my accounts? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of an obstacle? She had no answer. I looked around the room at the others. And the rest of you all sat there. You watched a young man assault an elderly woman and not one of you stood up. Not one of you said a word. My own sister. I looked at Margaret, who had tears streaming down her face. Let her husband pull her back down when she tried to help me. Eleanor, I'm sorry, Margaret whispered. I'm so sorry. Frank said we shouldn't get involved in family business, but I should have. Yes, I said. You should have. You all should have. Victor cleared his throat. There's more. Mrs. Matthews has also prepared documentation regarding the arrangements some of you have been enjoying at her expense. Brandon, you've been living in this house rent-free for 8 months. By our calculation, at fair market value, you owe your grandmother approximately $12,000. Brandon's face went red. She offered. She said I could stay. She offered temporary help while you got back on your feet, Victor corrected. You've made no effort to find employment, contribute to household expenses, or show any gratitude. Instead, tonight you assaulted her and demanded her bedroom. I want him out, I said flatly. Tonight. He has 2 hours to pack his belongings and leave my property. If he's not gone, I'm filing assault charges and requesting a restraining order. You can't throw me out, Brandon shouted. I have tenant rights. James Chen, the real estate attorney, spoke for the first time. His voice was mild but firm. Actually, as a family member staying without a lease and without paying rent, you have very limited rights, and given tonight's assault, Mrs. Matthews has grounds for immediate removal. I'd suggest you start packing. Brandon looked at his father desperately. Dad, are you going to let her do this? Robert's face was a mask of conflicting emotions, anger, shame, calculation. Mother, please, let's be reasonable. Brandon made a mistake, but he's young. He didn't mean... He meant every word, I said. And so did you. You've been planning this for months, Robert. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise. What do you want from us? Robert demanded, his careful composure finally cracking. What do you want us to say? Nothing, I replied. I don't want anything from you anymore. I wanted a family. I wanted to be treated with basic respect. I wanted to grow old in my own home without being seen as an obstacle or an asset to be liquidated. Apparently that was too much to ask. Jessica stood up, her face flushed with anger. You're being incredibly manipulative, Mother Matthews. This whole thing, the secret meetings with attorneys, the trust, the setup tonight, it's all designed to control us, to hold money over our heads. No, I said quietly. It's designed to protect me. From you. I turned back to Victor. Is everything in order? Yes. The trust is active and properly funded. The medical evaluations are current. The documentation of tonight's assault has been noted. Brandon's eviction notice is ready to serve. Everything is exactly as we discussed." "Good." I looked at Brandon. "You have 2 hours. I suggest you call a friend with a truck." "This is insane!" Brandon exploded. "You're a vindictive old bitch. You're doing this because you can't control us anymore." "Brandon, enough," Robert said, but his voice was weak. "No!" Brandon turned on his father. "This is your fault. You said she'd cave. You said if we pushed hard enough, if we made her feel like a burden, she'd sign everything over. You said she was weak." The words hung in the air like an accusation, which they were. Robert's face went from red to white. "I never said—" "You said exactly that." Jessica interrupted suddenly, her voice brittle. "You've been saying it for a year, Robert. You said your mother was too sentimental to stand up to family pressure. You said once we got her into a home, we'd have free access to this house and her accounts. You planned all of it." I wasn't surprised, but hearing it stated so baldly still sent a chill through me. Robert stared at his wife in horror. "Jessica, what are you doing?" "What am I doing?" Jessica laughed, a high, slightly hysterical sound. "I'm done pretending. She knows. Her attorney knows. Everyone in this room knows. You wanted her money. You needed her money. Your big promotion came with bigger expenses. The new car, the club membership, the private school for the kids, your mother's expectations of what a successful son should provide. We're drowning in debt, Robert, and your mother is sitting on a paid-off house worth $800,000 plus God knows what in retirement accounts." "Jessica, shut up," Robert hissed. "Why? It's over. She's not going to give us anything now. Your brilliant plan failed." Jessica turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something almost like respect in her eyes. "You're smarter than we thought, Mother Matthews. I'll give you that." "It doesn't take intelligence to recognize greed," I replied. "It just takes observation." Victor stepped forward. "I think we're done here. Brandon, you have your deadline. Robert, Jessica, Mrs. Matthews will be in contact through my office regarding any future interactions. I strongly suggest you consider the legal consequences before making any further threats or demands." "What about the rest of us?" my nephew Thomas asked nervously. "We didn't do anything. We didn't know about their plan." "You watched," I said simply. "You sat at my table, ate my food, and watched your cousin assault me without lifting a finger to help. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." "Eleanor, please," my sister Margaret sobbed. "Please, I'm so sorry. I should have stopped him. I should have—" "Yes," I agreed. "You should have. Margaret, you're my sister. We shared a bedroom growing up. I helped you through your divorce. I babysat your children. And when I needed you most, you chose silence." "What can I do?" Margaret pleaded. "Tell me what to do to make this right." "Nothing," I said, and the word felt final. "There's nothing to be done. You all made your choices tonight. Now you'll live with the consequences." I turned to Victor. "I'm tired. Can we finish this tomorrow?" "Of course. I'll stay until Brandon has vacated, and I'll have James document the condition of the property before he leaves." "Thank you." I looked around the room one last time. "I want all of you out of my house in the next 30 minutes. Except Brandon. You have 2 hours to pack. Everyone else, leave now." "But the dishes—" Patricia, Jessica's mother, began. "Leave them," I said. "Leave everything. Just go." They went. Slowly, reluctantly, casting backward glances and whispering among themselves, my family gathered their coats and purses and filed out of my house. Robert tried to approach me at the door, his hand outstretched, his expression pleading. "Mom, please, can we talk about this? Just you and me?" I looked at the hand that had never reached out to help me when I stumbled. The hand that had signed credit card receipts and mortgage documents but had never held mine in comfort or support. "No," I said. "We're done talking, Robert. We're done with everything. Victor will be in touch regarding the formal paperwork." "Formal paperwork? What does that mean?" "It means," Victor interjected smoothly, That Mrs. Matthews is establishing clear boundaries for future contact. All communication will go through my office. Any attempts at direct contact, threats, or harassment will be documented and may result in restraining orders. Robert's face crumpled. Mom, I'm your son. Yes, I agreed. You are. And I raised you better than this. I raised you to be honest, compassionate, and protective of those weaker than yourself. I raised you to value people over possessions. Somewhere along the way, you forgot those lessons. That's not my failure anymore. It's yours. I closed the door in his face. Through the window, I watched them leave, 12 people dispersing into the autumn night, their voices carrying on the wind in fragments of outrage and disbelief. Robert and Jessica stood by their car arguing for several minutes before finally driving away. Margaret sat in her vehicle, with her head on the steering wheel, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I felt nothing. That was perhaps the strangest part. I'd expected anger or grief or vindication. Instead, I felt simply empty, numb, as if I'd excised something diseased and was left with just a clean, hollow space. Victor touched my shoulder gently. Mrs. Matthews, why don't you sit down? James and I will supervise Brandon's departure. Thank you, Victor. I sank into my reading chair, the same chair where I'd nursed my son, read him bedtime stories, held him through nightmares. How long have you been an attorney? 35 years. Have you seen this before? Families turning on elderly members? More often than you'd think, he said quietly. More often than anyone wants to admit. Financial elder abuse is one of the fastest growing crimes in America, and the perpetrators are usually family members. That's depressing. It is, but tonight you protected yourself. That takes courage and clarity. Many people in your position would have caved to the pressure, signed over their assets, and ended up exactly where Brandon suggested, in a state facility with nothing, while their family sold off everything they'd worked for. I almost did cave, I admitted. 6 months ago, when I first heard Robert and Jessica talking, I told myself I'd misunderstood, that they couldn't possibly be planning what I thought they were planning. I wanted to believe in them. But you took precautions anyway. My husband taught me that hope is good, but verification is better. I smiled sadly. He also taught me that documents and lawyers are more reliable than promises. Upstairs, we could hear Brandon moving around, drawers slamming, footsteps heavy and angry. Victor excused himself to supervise, and I was left alone in my living room, surrounded by the debris of the ruined dinner. I should have felt triumphant. I'd outmaneuvered them. I'd protected my assets and my autonomy. I'd stood up for myself in the face of betrayal and assault. But all I felt was tired and alone. An hour and 40 minutes later, Brandon came downstairs with 3 suitcases, 2 garbage bags of belongings, and a face like a thundercloud. Victor and James followed him closely, James recording everything on his phone for documentation. "This is illegal eviction," Brandon muttered. "I'm going to sue you. I'm going to tell everyone what you did." "Please do," Victor said mildly. "I'd be happy to present tonight's events in a court of law, along with the medical evidence of your assault on your grandmother." Brandon shot me a look of pure hatred. "You're going to die alone. You know that? No one's going to visit you. No one's going to care." "Better alone than abused," I replied. He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Through the glass, I watched him throw his belongings into an old sedan and drive away, tires squealing in impotent rage. Victor and James stayed another hour, documenting everything, taking photographs of the house, having me sign several additional forms. Finally, near midnight, they prepared to leave. "What happens now?" I asked Victor at the door. "Now you live your life," he said. "The trust is secure. Your assets are protected. You have documentation of tonight's events should anyone try to claim you're incompetent or make any other spurious legal challenges. You're as safe as we can make you." "Legally safe," I said, "but not emotionally safe." "No," he agreed. "No attorney can protect you from that kind of pain. I'm sorry." After they left, I walked through my house, my empty, silent house. I washed the dishes from the abandoned dinner, scrubbing each plate with methodical precision. I wiped down the table where my grandson had announced his plan to exile me from my own home. I swept the floor where I'd stumbled after he shoved me. Finally, near 2 a.m, I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, the bedroom Brandon had wanted so badly, the bedroom I'd shared with my husband, the bedroom where I'd rocked my infant son, the bedroom that contained 42 years of memories. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet tears sliding down my weathered face, dropping onto my clasped hands. Tears for the family I'd thought I had. Tears for the son I'd raised who'd become a stranger. Tears for the innocence of believing blood was enough to guarantee loyalty. But even as I cried, I knew I'd made the right choice. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and the sound of my phone ringing. For a moment, I considered not answering. It was probably Robert or Jessica or some other family member calling to continue the fight. But it wasn't. Mrs. Matthews, this is Karen Patterson from Elder Advocates. Victor Ashford contacted me last night about your situation. I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Karen turned out to be a social worker who specialized in elder abuse cases. She came by that afternoon with resources, support groups, counseling services, legal aid information. She also brought something unexpected: hope. You'd be surprised how many people find themselves in similar situations, she said over tea at my kitchen table. And you'd be surprised how many of them build new families, chosen families, after extracting themselves from toxic situations. Chosen families? Friends? Neighbors? Community? People who value you for who you are, not what you have. She smiled warmly. You took the hardest step last night. You set boundaries and protected yourself. Now comes the healing part. Over the following weeks, word spread through my neighborhood about what had happened. I hadn't intended to share the story, but somehow these things never stay private. I expected judgment or pity. Instead, I found solidarity. Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down brought soup and shared her own story about cutting off her financially abusive brother. The Johnsons across the street invited me to their weekly book club. Father Michael from the church I'd attended sporadically for decades stopped by to offer spiritual counseling, not the preachy kind, but genuine listening and support. Most surprisingly, Margaret called. I don't expect forgiveness, she said when I answered. I don't deserve it. But Eleanor, I need you to know that I left Frank. What? I left him. That night, after we got home, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened, about what I didn't do. Frank told me to stay out of it, that it wasn't our business, that we couldn't risk alienating Robert's family, and I realized that I'd married a coward, and worse, I'd become one. I was silent, processing this. I'm not asking to fix things between us, Margaret continued. Maybe it's too late for that. But I wanted you to know that what happened that night changed me. It showed me who I'd become, and I didn't like what I saw. Where are you living? I asked. With my daughter in Portland for now. I filed for divorce last week. She paused. I also wanted to tell you that I gave a statement to Karen Patterson at Elder Advocates about everything I witnessed that night. She said it might help with your documentation if Robert tries anything legal. Thank you, I said softly. Margaret, I'm not ready to rebuild what we had, but I appreciate you taking accountability. That matters. It's a start, she agreed. Maybe someday. Maybe, I interrupted gently. But not today. 2 months after that terrible Sunday, I received another phone call. This one was from my youngest grandchild, Lily, Robert's daughter, 16 years old. Grandma Eleanor? Her voice was small, uncertain. I know I'm probably not supposed to call you. Mom and Dad said you're having some kind of breakdown and we shouldn't bother you. But that doesn't sound right. You were never the breakdown type. I smiled despite myself. No, sweetheart, I'm not having a breakdown. What did your parents tell you about that night? They said there was a family disagreement, that you got confused and overreacted and kicked everyone out. They said you're being influenced by lawyers who want your money. And what do you think? A long pause. I think Brandon's an asshole. Sorry, I mean a jerk. And I think Dad's been really stressed about money for a while, and I think— She took a shaky breath. I think something bad happened and everyone's lying about it. You're a smart girl, Lily. Will you tell me the truth? So I did. Not every detail. She didn't need to hear everything, but enough. When I finished, there was a long silence. I'm sorry, Lily finally said, her voice thick with tears. I'm so sorry, Grandma. That's awful. That's so awful. It was, I agreed. But I'm okay now. I'm safe, and I'm taking care of myself. Can I see you sometime? Without telling Mom and Dad? I know that's sneaky, but I miss you. And I don't want you to think we're all like Brandon. I'd like that, I said, warmth flooding through me. I'd like that very much. Lily started visiting every other Saturday afternoon. We'd have lunch, talk about her school and her friends, watch old movies. She never asked me for money, never brought up the house or my assets. She just wanted time together. Why are you different? I asked her one afternoon. Different from Dad, you mean? She considered this. I don't know. Maybe because I actually listened to your stories when I was little. The ones about you and Grandpa building everything from nothing, about working 2 jobs while putting him through college, about saving for years to buy this house. I understood that what you have, you earned. Dad talks about your money like it's already his, like he's entitled to it just for being born. That never made sense to me. Out of the mouths of teenagers. 3 months after the confrontation, Victor called with news. Robert and Jessica filed for bankruptcy last week, he said. They're losing the house. Their creditors are circling. I thought you should know in case they make another approach. Do you think they will? I think desperate people do desperate things, but your protections are solid. They can't touch you legally. He was right about the desperation. 2 days later, Robert appeared at my door. He looked terrible, gaunt, unshaven, his expensive suit rumpled and ill-fitting. I'm not here to argue, he said immediately, holding up his hands. I'm not here to make excuses. Can we talk? Please? Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat in the living room, the same room where everything had fallen apart, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. I'm sorry, Robert finally said. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need to say it. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it, for planning behind your back, for letting Brandon attack you, for being a coward when you needed me to be a son. Why? I asked. Why did you do it, Robert? We weren't rich, but I raised you with enough. I taught you that character mattered more than money. What happened? I don't know, he said. But then he stopped himself. No, that's not true. I do know. It was gradual. First, it was just wanting to provide for my family the way Dad provided for us. Then it was wanting a little more, a nicer house, better schools. Then it was keeping up with Jessica's family, with the partners at my firm. Somewhere along the way, enough stopped being enough, and you became an obstacle, an inconvenience. I stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as an asset that would someday transfer to me, and the weight started to feel unbearable. So you decided to accelerate the process. Yes. He met my eyes, and I saw genuine shame there. I told myself we were doing what was best for you, that you'd be happier in a managed care facility, that you were becoming a burden to yourself. I invented a narrative where we were the heroes and you were the problem that needed solving. But you never asked me what I wanted. No, because I already knew the answer, and I didn't like it. We sat in silence again. I've lost everything, Robert said eventually. The house, most of our savings, my reputation. Jessica left me last week. She said I'd promised her a lifestyle I couldn't deliver, and she wasn't going to be dragged down by my failure. I felt a surprising flicker of sympathy. "I'm sorry you're hurting." "Are you?" He sounded genuinely curious. "Yes, you're still my son, Robert. I'm furious with you. I'm hurt by what you did. But I don't take joy in your suffering. Would you—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Would you consider helping me? Not financially," he added quickly. "I'm not asking for money. I know I have no right. But maybe advice, guidance. I don't know how to fix this. Any of this." I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I'll make you a deal," I finally said. "I'll meet with you once a month for coffee. We'll talk. Not about money or inheritance or my assets. We'll talk about how you rebuild character, how you reconstruct a life based on values instead of transactions, how you become the man I raised you to be." "And that's all?" "That's everything," I replied. "Robert, I can't give you money. Not now, probably not ever. The trust is established and I have no intention of changing it. But if you actually want to change, to grow, to become better, I'll help with that. Not as a benefactor. As a mother." Tears streamed down his face. "I don't deserve that." "No," I agreed. "You don't. But I'm offering it anyway, not because you've earned it, but because I believe people can change, if they want to badly enough." "What if I fail?" "Then you fail. But at least you'll fail trying to be better instead of failing while trying to be richer." That was 8 months ago. Robert and I have had coffee every month since. Sometimes the conversations are painfully awkward. Sometimes he backslides into old patterns of thinking, entitlement, resentment, justification. But slowly, incrementally, I've watched him start to understand. He got a job as a paralegal, not the high-powered attorney position he once held, but honest work. He moved into a small apartment. He started attending therapy. He apologized to Lily and began rebuilding that relationship. He has not asked me for money once. Brandon, on the other hand, sent me a message 6 months after the incident. It was forwarded through Victor, full of typos and rage, demanding I pay for what I did and threatening legal action for emotional distress and defamation. Victor responded with a formal letter outlining the assault documentation, witness statements, and potential criminal charges I'd thus far declined to file. Brandon never contacted me again. Jessica, I heard through the neighborhood gossip network, married a wealthy investment banker within 4 months of her divorce from Robert. I hope she found what she was looking for. I suspect she'll discover that transactional relationships can be dissolved as easily as they're formed. As for me, I'm still in my house, still in my bedroom, the one Brandon wanted so desperately, still independent, still competent, still living life on my own terms. The foundation I established with my trust has begun its work. We've provided grants to 3 elder advocacy organizations, funded legal aid for seniors facing exploitation, and created educational programs about financial abuse. My attorney Victor sits on the board, along with Karen Patterson and 2 other professionals who specialize in elder rights. When I die, which will hopefully not be for many years yet, this will be my legacy. Not money passed to ungrateful children who see inheritance as entitlement, but real change. Real protection for people who find themselves where I once stood, vulnerable, alone, facing betrayal from the people who should protect them most. I've made new friends, joined new communities, discovered that family isn't always biology, sometimes it's choice. My neighbor Mrs. Chen and I have dinner together twice a week. Father Michael and I have long philosophical discussions about forgiveness and boundaries. Lily visits every Saturday without fail. Margaret and I have started speaking again. Cautiously, with clear boundaries, but with genuine affection, slowly rebuilding. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I sit in my bedroom and think about that Sunday dinner. About the moment everything fell apart, and, paradoxically, the moment everything came into focus. I learned something important that night. I learned that love without respect is worthless. I learned that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to say no, to set boundaries, to protect yourself, even when it hurts. I learned that dignity matters more than keeping the peace. I learned that being alone is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Being surrounded by people who see you as an obstacle or an asset, that's far worse. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that at 73 years old, I was still capable of courage, still capable of standing up for myself, still capable of choosing my own path, even when everyone around me tried to push me onto theirs. My name is Eleanor Matthews. I'm 73 years old, and I'm doing just fine.